Kia ora and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's World IP Day panel discussion, a collaboration between NZIPA and IPONZ. My name is Lauren Hudson and I'm the Business Delivery Manager for IPONZ. It's great to have you all here with us today. A big welcome to Duncan, our moderator, and our 4 panel members today. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass you over to Tom Robertson. He will be formally introducing our panel members for today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, Tom Robertson from the President of NZIPA. Today's topic, as you probably would have read, is IP and the Sustainability Development Goals, Building Our Common Future with Innovation and Creativity. We have 4 panelists here today who will discuss this topic with a sort of a New Zealand perspective, and maybe what sort of impact, what innovative solutions that they maybe have in order to sort of meet the goals. So I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Veronica Stevenson, CEO, founder of and executive director of Humble Bee Bio, a New Zealand's leading biomaterials startup. Humble Bee Bio is on a mission to build novel biomaterials that solve market and environmental problems. We also have Richard Newcomb, Head Scientist of Plant and Food Research. Richard is responsible for science quality, science strategy, strategic collaborations, and science capability development within plant, food and research. We have Kane Elwood, EVP Carbon Zero Transition and R&D of Fisher & Paykel Appliances. Kane works as Fisher & Paykel's Appliance Executive VP, Carbon Zero Transition and Research Development. And finally, we have Jessica Chang, Group Manager, Business Operations of Hotline Labs. Hotline Labs is on a mission to decarbonise commercial greenhouses by transforming forestry waste into carbon dioxide. Janice manages Hotline's intellectual portfolio and overall business operations. And now I'll pass on to the moderator, Duncan de Geest of AJ Parks, to get this discussion underway. Over to you, Duncan.
Thanks, Tom, and ahi Māori, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you especially to our panellists, both for their time today and also for taking the time to have a preliminary discussion with me on Monday, which I found very informative and very stimulating, just in terms of the things that they're all working on and their relationship to what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit, please bear with me, and then from there we'll turn over to the panellists to hear their thoughts. So the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all United Nations members in 2015, and that created 17 World Sustainable Development Goals, which for brevity I'll refer to as SDGs. They were created with the laudable aim of peace and prosperity for people and the planet, while tackling climate change and working to preserve oceans and forests. The SDGs highlight connections between the environmental, social and economic aspects of sustainable development. So as you might imagine, sustainability is at the heart of those goals. There are 17 of them with short titles. I actually might run through them just in case you haven't come across them. I guess this will be a test of my speed talking. So no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and last but not least, partnerships for the goals. Each goal typically has about 8 to 12 targets, and each target has between 1 and 4 indicators used to measure progress towards reaching those targets. I will spare you the goals and the targets. The goals, in the course of our discussion on Monday, it became apparent that the goals represent the world's greatest issues and problems to solve, and that solving those problems will require innovation and creativity. And necessarily, this provides the link to intellectual property. So our discussion today is going to focus on what this means from a New Zealand perspective. What innovative solutions are Kiwis working on to help solve these big global problems, and how can IP help? Today's panelists come from a range of companies that are at different stages on their IP journeys. Some have a long track record of innovation, others are primarily progressing relatively new innovations. But the one thing that we all agreed on was that IP is an essential tool that must be applied if we are to achieve the SDGs, and that it's a vehicle to drive commercial focus towards those goals. All of our panelists are involved in efforts to contribute to sustainability and the reduction in negative environmental impacts. And the theme that came out during our preliminary discussion was that essentially IP is a mechanism that can enable a return on investment and so reward their efforts in that regard. So what I'd like to do at that point, you've heard enough from me, more than enough, no doubt. I'd actually like to turn over to Kane. One of the things that became apparent during our discussion on Monday was that Fisher & Paykel Appliances has taken a particular approach to sustainability. And Kane, perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure, Duncan. Hi, everybody. Look, I think at Fisher & Paykel Appliances, we drive our strategy by anticipating the future. And in that changing world, we absolutely see sustainability as the movement of our time. So within that, we've actually made a really bold strategic choice to focus first on climate change and carbon emissions that cause it. So of all of the 17 SDGs, we've really driven a focus on one, primarily because we believe that starting focus will drive faster results, and it's with real focus we can make significant impact. Also, we look at our business and we believe climate change is an issue that we can really make an impact on. The first thing we did really was to go out and do a baseline for our business and understand our carbon emissions. And we learned from that more than 99% of our emissions don't come from our own operations, but they come from the things that we buy and sell on our value chain. And actually 90% of our total emissions come from predominantly the energy consumed in the lifetime of the appliances that we sell. So that's where we've really focused, and that's where we believe that we can make a huge difference. For us, it's driven a couple of really important, I guess, strategic steps. The first has been to establish a new carbon zero home solutions business. So expanding from just appliances to think about how energy is generated, it's stored, and it's managed within the whole of the home. And the second thing is one of my responsibilities, which is establishing a new Carbon Zero Smart Home R&D Institute, because we believe that to really solve that 90% of our emissions, we're not going to get there with today's technologies. And we're adding external science and external research to the engineering and the innovation that we've got within our teams.
Thanks very much, Kane. I'd like to invite Veronica now to give her perspective on it. So we're basically moving from a more traditional manufacturer in Fisher & Paykel Appliances to someone who is at, I guess, the cutting edge, if you like, of a new type of manufacturing, biomanufacturing. So Veronica, tell us about your IP journey, I suppose, and also about Humblebee Bio and its contribution to the SDGs.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, delighted to. I love this topic. So one of our pieces of IP is a composition of matter patent that was inspired by a material made by a solitary bee. And from this, we're developing products that stimulates the synthesis of really essential proteins in human cells, have growth promotion activities, form coatings that could replace petrochemical films in personal care formulations, and create high performance sustainable fabrics. So like the impact for potential for our IP is vast, but in and of themselves they're not going to do anything to progress the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's something that and that's true for all pieces of intellectual property. Without the mahi that brings to life its impact and its potential, the innovation won't have any kind of lasting impact. And so this goes for when technology is bought and shelved, or when product market fit isn't found. And so for IP to have that impact, it has to be worked on and validated and imbued with modi that it can have that impact when it goes out into the world. And that's something that is very active in within the Humblebee team. At Humblebee, our values and our mission is around improving global environmental health and consumer health by creating novel biomaterials. So kaitiaki and ecological understanding are really part of the culture at Humblebee. And so when I think about the Sustainable Development Goals, they're an incredibly useful framework, and the ones that we are really like contributing to are like clean water and sanitation, climate action, life below water, life on land. But these are all related. You can't be well and have good health in an unwell climate. Life on land and below water won't thrive in an unwell climate. And so these Sustainable Development Goals are inextricably linked to good health and well-being, which goes to the original reason for starting Humblebee Bio in the first place. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Veronica. Your final mention of good health and well-being provides a really good segue to Richard from Plant Food Research, or PFR, because in the course of our discussion, that was the SDG that Richard had identified as being perhaps the one that particularly resonates with PFR. Would you like to tell us a little bit more, Richard?
Absolutely. Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, you might think Plant and Food Research would be, show a lot of affiliation with the reducing hunger SDG, but actually, I think, we do feed a lot of people out of New Zealand, and a lot of that uses our research and cultivars, but we only feed 50 million people with the food that we produce in New Zealand. But at Plant and Food, we're really lucky to have this part of the foods that we work on being fruit and vegetables and seafood, so they all have a natural health halo. And I think, those foods really do contribute to, to that health and well-being SDG. So we see we're making a real contribution there. The more we can get people eating those sort of healthy foods, the less we have to, if we can put the ambulance at the top of the cliff in terms of health and well-being, the less we have to deal with things when they hit the bottom of the cliff. So we think that's really important. And, an IP plays a huge role in that. I mean, we use plant variety rights to protect the new cultivars that we produce that are of all these fruits and vegetables. So it's perhaps one of the lesser known kind of intellectual property right tools that we have in our toolkit, but a very, very important one. Just just a few of our cultivars, in New Zealand, hundreds of millions of dollars per annum in export revenues, but also, but it's not just obviously the economic returns, it's the health value that those foods bring to the people that consume them that's more important. I mean, some of them have some of the highest levels of vitamin C sitting in a fruit bowl, so that's providing a lot of well-being to people out there, consumers all over the world.
Thanks very much, Richard. Actually, my morning tea this morning was a PVR protected red kiwi fruit.
Lovely.
Excellent. And I guess the link there in terms of crop production gives us a really good reason to turn over to Janice and find out a little bit more about Hot Lime Labs and what you do.
Kia ora, thanks Duncan. Hi everyone. So at Hot Lime, we have a mission to decarbonize half of the world's greenhouses within 30 years. We are a company or a startup that came out of Callahan Innovation, and it's really built on a set of technology that has the core of IP around the pellets that we have invented. But in the early days, the pellets themselves, or the technology itself, was looking for a problem to solve. And it was actually fortuitously through a bunch of organize industry events really that really connected our founding scientist, Dr. Vlatko Materidge, who identified a key area that we can really apply our technology. And really what that has allowed us to convert what would be forestry waste or wood waste being burned in a very controlled fashion, but at higher temperature to sequester carbon dioxide. We capture the carbon dioxide not to lock it away purely, but along the way to locking away that carbon dioxide, we actually plumb that carbon dioxide into commercial greenhouses and actually allowing the plants to grow. You can already pick up that there's some circularity in that story. And also along the way, not only do plants or crops grow more productively in high-tech greenhouses, but also we produce biochar that ultimately has applications in and of itself along the way back into the ground. We're really excited to create that impact to avoid 120 megatons of fossil emissions and sequester 1 megaton of carbon dioxide every year. IP is a core part of Hotline Labs being, the name of the company itself indicates that it came from the lab, but being able to convert what is deep technology into a scalable, workable system that actually has value in the society is something that we're really excited about. Veronica helpfully pointed out that, you can carry out, your values around sustainability, both personally as well as in a company. But it's important to be able to articulate what that looks like for a company like Hotline Labs. And for us, 2 of our 4 values is around doing the right thing and working like a ninja. And you can interpret it in many ways, but doing the right thing from the perspective of the environment and sustainability really means connecting up just the way we work towards achieving those goals. And working like a ninja really, for me, looks like being quite smart about the inventions or ideas that we come up with and stewarding them in a way that actually allows us to flourish. For us, it's in the horticulture food sector, but for others, I'm sure that applies too.
Thanks very much, Janice. That's absolutely fascinating introduction from all of you to what you're doing. Just at this point, I'd just mention to the audience that we've got a lot of things to talk about, but we may have some time for some questions. If you would like to ask any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'll moderate those and put them to the panel as appropriate or when we have an opportunity to do so. One of the themes that came out of our discussion on Monday was the significance of partnerships. It is one of the sustainable development, or the short title of one of the sustainable development goals itself being partnerships for the goals. But also it was apparent that for all of you in your various IP journeys, that partnerships have played a significant role. Kane, would you like to tell us a little bit more about, I guess, the impact that Fisher & Paykel Appliances is able to achieve through its partnership being part of the wider higher group?
Yeah, great question and great topic. I've actually had a role helping to coordinate and facilitate a lot of the technology sharing and technology transfer across the hire group. Fisher & Paykel joined the hire group in 2013, and we've still got really key responsibility in New Zealand for the Fisher & Paykel luxury brand globally and also DCS outdoor brand. But we work so closely with hire across product and technology globally. Gone from probably one of the smallest appliance companies in the world to be part of the largest appliance company in the world. So look, that's really important, and I think it gives us scale. So when we look at our expertise around brushless DC motors and controls, we could apply that to the 250,000 laundry appliances that we sell every year. But when we look at scaling that across the hire group, there's tens of millions of laundry appliances that use our technology across the hire group, and that's just one example. Look, secondly, I think there's a lot of New Zealand partnerships, and we've, as part of our R&D Institute, we've created some research challenges, which we believe are going to be the enablers to get our carbon emissions down significantly, 50% by 2030 and 90% by 2050. So one of our key partnerships locally has been the New Zealand Product Accelerator, and we've actually kicked off a multi-year research project with GNS Science to really help develop new insulation technologies that we believe could take about 11% out of our total carbon footprint. look, we'd love to be doing more of that, and we're also quite active trying to stimulate more partnerships with universities and with the wider research community in New Zealand to really help to contribute to reducing our carbon emissions.
That's great. Thanks, Kane. Veronica, in the course of our discussions on Monday, you were discussing partnerships and how that's played a part in the Humblebee journey. But one of the things you mentioned was that there are occasionally barriers to developing those partnerships. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that in the context of your company? Sorry, Veronica, at the risk of stating the obvious, you're on mute. Thank you.
Okay. This is one of my favourite goals because, you know, we truly are all in this together. No one escapes the impacts of a polluted, degraded planet. Working with others in their fields of expertise, like we've worked with Scion and the Ferrier Institute, and oh gosh, and Callaghan Innovation and University of Auckland and Otago and Queensland, and like we've really been able to be quite interdisciplinary and international, and it's such a font of inspiration and joy and of relief, really, that knowing and seeing firsthand that there are really smart, earnest people out there dedicating their lives and applying their minds and their skill set to solving these problems, and that's just I love that. And the thing that I feel that there's an enormous opportunity on, and something that we struck a bit of a barrier early on, was our ability to partner with New Zealand with regard to the bioprospecting that we were doing around the nest material of the solitary bee. So our IP is based on this biological material made by the solitary bee and the gene sequences in them. And then while we were engaging in the necessary bureaucracy of doing that bioprospecting work, we found out that biopiracy is a real problem, and the kind of bureaucratic regulations globally that are there to protect Indigenous sovereignty, data sovereignty, and Indigenous rights around the protection of those that biodiversity weren't doing a great job, because I could see lots of examples where that hadn't happened, but also I was involved in trying to have those conversations in New Zealand, and that wasn't possible because we hadn't ratified the Nagoya Protocol, but Australia had, but they weren't giving any heed to the Indigenous communities or the original kaitiaki of those species, and that kind of sat really poorly with me, and I think it's a huge problem and enormous opportunity, and I see Y262 as an opportunity for Aotearoa, and I think that we've got a history here in New Zealand of really Indigenous-led, Māori-led novel legal mechanisms. So I think we're quite well positioned to be a strong voice in this discussion for Māori and Indigenous people globally, so that the Indigenous people who often are actually the ones who knew that there was a benefit from a species, you know, their rongoa and their knowledge about medicinal properties is often a lead for people who come in and then do extract the gene sequence or the molecule or whatever from a particular species. So I think it's really important that benefit flows through, particularly because I think we're all coming to realise that Indigenous people are the guardians of 80% of the world's biodiversity, and we're not going to be able to achieve these goals without their help. So yeah, that's something that I've over the years become much more interested in and dug into as I made that discovery while we were going through the process of the Nagoya Protocol and the benefit sharing with Queensland. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Yeah, because the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing, for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, as it was developed as a supplementary agreement to a convention on biological diversity. So its aim is the implementation of one of three objectives of the conventional biodiversity. So fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of the utilisation of genetic resources, so contributing to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. And New Zealand hasn't, as Veronica noted, signed nor ratified the Nagoya Protocol. The New Zealand government has apparently deferred doing so because of issues associated with, among other things, the Y262 claim. So the Y262, you mentioned, Veronica, that you thought that that was a significant opportunity, and that was something I think that Richard mentioned as well during our discussion on Monday. Richard, would you like to elaborate on that as part of how, in terms of your role within PFR, sorry?
Sure. I mean, we do see this as a significant opportunity, but I think we need to do a lot of thinking with Māori in terms of what that benefit sharing looks like. And I think a lot of our current concepts around IP protection and benefit sharing probably need to, be put to one side as we kind of rethink them in our own way. I mean, there are kind of framework set up in Nagoya for doing that, but because of our special relationship through Te Tiriti with our tangata whenua here, I think we've got the opportunity to think whether they're fit for purpose for us as a nation. So yeah, we've been doing some work here looking at kind of legal constructs that do things like protect the organism in question, and in line with Māori's aspirations and duties as kaitiakitanga of those organisms, and look at ways of using any kind of revenue that comes from the commercialisation to flow back through the commercial entities, but all the way back to help protection of that organism. So I mean, we've got a number of different sort of case studies we're working through, but also working with some of our in-house legal and some external Māori around how we can construct these different approaches, just using contract law to begin with. Where that might be much more appropriate for us. So I think we've got a long way to go, but certainly, we're doing quite a bit of thinking and have started on that journey. Thanks,
Richard. In our discussions on Monday, Janice, you mentioned, I guess, perhaps a less obvious way of fostering partnerships that Hotline Labs has been has as part of their cultural ethos, if you like. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in addition to your obvious ways of partnerships, whether it's joining up with other companies or technologies or groups that have technology that are complementary, one of the ways we see it is also in developing the talent that we have either within Hotline Labs, or to attract talent that brings with them expertise. They may already have experience in designing, for example, a high temperature furnace. Safe to say in New Zealand, we have those industries, but they are in much smaller scale, and we're a smaller country. And so some of those engineering expertise naturally come from overseas. And so one of the things that we are really aware of is actually in supporting Hotline towards the goals to scale our systems to all of New Zealand's greenhouses and Europe's greenhouses. We actually need incredible talent, and some of them can be trained locally, but some of them we need those experts who have industry experience to be part of the team and contribute to our mission to decarbonize the horticulture industry. But I think it doesn't stop there, because if I think about, my background, I was trained as a scientist. And while you have picked up tools and skills while you're at the lab or building a machine, some of those tools carry on with you in other forms and other jobs that you end up in. And I think our vision goes further than what happens at Hotline Labs, and we hope that we are a good space to collate all those talent that drives us on that mission towards decarbonizing horticulture, SDG number 13 around climate action, but also will ripple through in the future, hopefully in New Zealand, but otherwise it's still good globally.
Thanks, Janice. I guess Hotline Labs is a great example of international collaboration right from its very embryonic phase, even with Vlatko coming to New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the early team of 3 or 4 of them actually were from different nationalities who have come together with that common language, obviously around excitement around our technology, but have carried through for the last 7-8 years, I think, if you include the early embryonic days of creating the invention.
Yeah. Kane, one of the things you mentioned was that one of the key issues when you're applying new technology is basically identifying what the best problem to solve is. That most technologies can be applied in a range of different ways. And so it's working out, to bring some focus to your development, is actually working out what that best problem is. What's the approach that Fisher & Paykel Appliances takes to that?
Oh, look, we have formed a view of a changing world, and we've formed a view of kind of 5 mega trends that we believe are going to shape the future of our homes and the ways that we live in those homes. And as I mentioned, sustainability and climate change is one of those. But then we translate those mega trends down into some of what we call the customer interests. So the things that people will be looking for when they purchase or when they use appliances in their homes in the future. So that's really the way that we form a view of not just today's reality or what our competitors are doing, but what we think is going to really help us to win in the future. And that's where I think climate change and the carbon emissions, the efficiency and the energy consumption of our products in the home is really one of those kind of big bets on establishing the future for our business. And so we're investing really heavily in the R&D and the product development to really help to I guess build those customer interests and make sure that we've got a winning proposition as the world transitions to a low carbon economy.
Because one of the things that came out that you mentioned that I didn't appreciate was that, so for your products, that 90% of the carbon emissions are actually associated with the use of those products as opposed to the production of them. Because I would have assumed it was probably the other way around. And I found that quite an amazing statistic, and certainly gave me cause to I guess reflect on some of the buying decisions that I've perhaps made and will impact on my future buying decisions.
Yeah, I mean that measurement that we did in 2020 of our baseline really, it was a surprise to us as well, Duncan, and that really helps to form our strategy around. Actually, it's not just the appliances; it's the way that they work in the home energy system or in the national energy system. Look, and secondly, it's actually a lot of the things about the way people use the appliances, which cycles they use, or even which time of the day they use those appliances makes a huge difference. So it's really focused us on that use phase, and realizing that that's the biggest opportunity that we've got to really decarbonize our business and our customers' homes.
Right. And for you, Veronica, and with Humblebee, it's fairly apparent that your technology has got some fairly wide-ranging applications. How are you going about, I guess, identifying the best problem for you to solve, and how is that leading your company's work?
We took 2 things. One of the first things that we did when we had made enough of our material, we kind of had milligrams, and we were like, what, we can do one thing, what experiment we're going to run before we make some more. And we went back to our kind of foundational values of like, we want to improve global environmental health and consumer health, so let's see if it's cytotoxic first. And that actually uncovered some growth promotion and cellular responses that opened up some slightly unexpected markets that are higher value, lower volume, great as first entries for a company like Humblebee, who will need to scale to meet the demands of the regulatory driven plastic removal from consumer products and supply chains. And so that's the kind of the impact, the environmental impact products of the business. So around creating a sustainable fiber for the textiles sector. So a small percentage of our protein, when included in material, improved its tensile strength massively, and so that has the potential to valorize otherwise degraded synthetic fibers back into the supply chain, or be a technical and high performance fiber of its own. And the EU actually adopted the microplastics regulation last September, which had been long in discussion, and that has really lit a fire under people in terms of, because they're going to have to put on their products formulated with microplastics or responsible for microplastic pollution if they don't adhere to this. And this is not just in fabrics, but also in personal care. Something that most consumers don't really know is that in your serum or your moisturizer, your foundation, your sunscreen, are nanoparticles of plastic that form a film on your face and stop it and stop it slipping off or increasing its durability. But you wash that and it's straight down the drain, and there's no kind of possibility for it to be reclaimed. And that's and obviously a huge plastic pollution problem, and not one that you can kind of pick up at the beach. You know, it just is. And the research now that plastics found in our gut and in our food and water. So we're really, that regulation, I think, is going to be a massive game changer. And we are in conversations with some big global multinationals who are going, you know, we need to change not only what we're making our packaging out of, which has been kind of on the radar for a while, but what we formulate with. And that's where the film former product that Humblebee is developing can help.
Great, thanks very much. And with Hotline Labs, Janice, obviously you, I think, mentioned even that one of the challenges was started off with a particular technology that was viewed at solving a particular problem, and since then the company has perhaps morphed a little bit. I guess what I'd be interested in hearing about from the Hotline Labs perspective is, how has that changed your IP strategy, or has it indeed changed your IP strategy at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Duncan. During the preliminary chat a few days ago, for the interest of the audience, I guess I was telling the story about how with our technology, I mean, at the heart of our technology, it was proprietary limestone pellets that are designed in a way that can capture carbon dioxide, allow us to funnel out all the toxic gases and clean it up, and then in a very controlled fashion be able to release pure, clean, green carbon dioxide that was sequestered from waste product, waste wood, into a commercial greenhouse. And that technology itself, you would think that it could be applicable in many settings too, because carbon dioxide gets released in many industrial processes. And so in the early days, and I have been relayed this story that Blackko had experienced on a I think agricultural technology industry roadshow. He was on the back of a bus, and a greenhouse grower was sitting at the back and yelled out, "Which of you boffins could help me solve the problem of carbon dioxide? I can't buy it, it's getting more expensive." So for interest, a lot of commercial greenhouses supplement their greenhouses with carbon dioxide. Currently, they come from burning natural gas to generate heat and carbon dioxide, or you buy your tanks of compressed carbon dioxide. You can imagine that that will be costly, coupled with a shortage of carbon dioxide in New Zealand, just puts us in a bit of a tight spot. The timing was perfect. Actually, our technology initially was thought it could be applied into putting into scrubbers in industrial places to clean up and sequester carbon dioxide. But here, actually, it is producing a high value product for agriculture and horticulture. It brings me to the thought about the carrot or the stick. You know, there are incentivizations and punishments for emissions. I think at that time, the punishment, or there wasn't enough incentivization or punishment really to remove carbon emissions, at least in that original setting. And so it was very serendipitous and fortuitous that we were able to identify the application in horticulture. But that's only the start. The original plan is still there, and actually the technology and the IP that underpins it still allows us to apply our base technology into those settings. And we're very excited that now we're able to, now that we've kind of validated the system, deployed our first commercial system to a customer site, we're able to come back and go, actually, can we make available our expertise, our IP in a way that supports other major industries, think, cement or lime industries and many others. And we're excited to be able to enter that now.
What I love about the Hotline Labs story, I guess, is that the way we've all been, I guess, of late, taught to think about carbon dioxide as clean and green are the last two adjectives that you would typically attach to carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
But given, I guess, its many uses, both within the horticultural setting that you're working on, but also, in food production and things like that, it actually is an essential gas with a number of significant uses in addition to its climate impacts. For you, Richard, within PFR, I'm guessing that, if you're looking, for example, at plant breeding, there are probably innumerable things that you could work on. How do you go about identifying, I suppose, the best problem to solve and that leading into valuable IP?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's something that we're always asking ourselves, what should we be focusing on? And classically, the two major types of kind of traits that we talk about a lot are the grower traits, so things that will make the plants or animals grow better, and then the traits that the consumers really value, those health and well-being and taste and smell characteristics, making the food delicious, for instance. So we're always looking at a balance for those. So we do quite a lot of research on consumer wants and desires. So we actually go out into the marketplace and ask them what they would like. We even take various mock-ups of fruit and veg out there to see what they want. We also go and talk to the growers, of course, and we talk to our partners and customers around their desires and things that would make their life easier in terms of the traits that we're looking at. Of course, I think climate change has really brought a lot of things into focus. We've had, Cyclone Gabrielle has brought many things into focus for our growers. And you could imagine, the week after that, I was getting lots of phone calls around how can we make our plant production systems more resilient to these extreme events? Do we need to develop new root stocks that are resilient to waterlogging as well as drought and all of those things? So I think we're seeing a bit of a shift. I mean, it's fair to say we were very consumer trait focused, and you can see a lot of our products are very colourful and tasty, but we're now probably focusing a bit more on making sure that those on the sustainability traits and climate resilience traits, making sure that the crop plants are using as little inputs as possible in terms of water and fertilizer and those sorts of inputs into the system, but also they're resilient to what's going to be coming at us over the next little while.
Thanks very much, Richard. In addition to, I guess, the significance of IP for a company's own development and longevity, it also has implications in the investor space in terms of individual investors obviously looking at a company's IP status. But allied with that, I guess, also is a desire for individual investors either to be wanting to make ethical choices with their investing, or for investment funds having their own sort of reporting obligations. And I guess this question is probably more applicable to Veronica and Janice, given the relative stages of your companies. But how much of a role do the SDGs play for you in your, I guess, investment pitches and things like that? Perhaps if we can start with you, Janice.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so Hotline Labs was established about 6 or 7 years ago, and by nature of being a startup in the deep tech space, really that relies on a solid kind of base of technology that is protectable, that allows you to differentiate from others, and allows you to make a case to anyone who's going to reach into their pocket. to invest in the company, and you need to show them that, I guess, there's sufficient protection that allows them to see the returns that they want in the future. That's critical in the early stages, and certainly all throughout as you progress through your your patent examination process. But in our sector, where you have we've got patents on the processes, we've got patents on our limestone pellets, but really being able to make the best limestone pellets in itself without the right housing and the right processes and the right systems will not result in a final product for the customer. And so we're becoming critically aware as a company in a scale-up phase that it is our duty to really support the patent portfolio that we have, really convert it to value by being able to design systems that you can manufacture at scale, for example. And not all of that is always covered in kind of codified patents or codified IP. But from a perspective of an investor, they come together. I think your ability to demonstrate that you have sufficient protection and a strong basis, while at the same time being able to convert that IP base into a final product that's scalable, both in New Zealand and globally, is front and center. If you think about where we are at, the investors we are looking to are not only New Zealand or Australia based, we're looking at global investors. In addition, for example, if you're going to investors that around climate tech, then the drivers for the company around SDGs, particularly around SDG number 13, climate action, is front and center. And they also seek to see how you, I guess, pull together your expertise and your team to be able to support that SDG, because actually all the SDGs are related to one another too. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Janice. And Veronica, what's your perspective on that?
Just make sure to unmute myself this time. The IP has been foundational for both interest from investors early on in terms of our ability to create something novel, which we have done, and we're confident we're going to be able to do that because this species and these solitary bears hadn't been sequenced or had this level of engagement in them prior to. Previously, other companies in this protein manufacture space had focused on spider silk, which is obviously an extremely well described, publicly known invention, and so that's a very crowded space, and so we've got some really good points of difference there, and so we're in a good spot from that perspective, so that our investors are very happy with that and that progress and the development of our IP and the number of patents that we've got and the basis of trademark. And for customers, it's a really important thing for them. So when we're talking to large, because our business model is large B2B, so we're going after big fish because we want to make a huge impact. So we want to sell to companies who have hundreds of brands, selling into almost every geography on earth kind of straight away, rather than kind of inching our way up the chain. And they want to know it's protected. If they're going to bet on a product, they want to know that it's not going to get something else isn't going to spring up and compete with them on it. So that and how green is it are the two kind of first questions. Well, first, does it work? And then those other two. And we tend to frame it not in the sustainable development goals with regard to our customers and the investors that we're talking to, because it's around the problem we're solving for them. What particular regulation are they seeking to be compliant with, and how does that look for their products? I will say, and this might be slightly controversial, but in going out and pitching to the clean tech sector, I do feel that there has been a kind of a reduction on what is considered clean tech to carbon, without, and it is a broader, good health and well-being isn't just, as I said earlier, just about carbon. It is about clean water and sanitation. It's about life below land, life on water. It is, when we think about the planetary boundaries, where it's an interconnected ecosystem, and so you don't want to have it entirely be reduced. And so it's certainly something that some of the clean tech investors get, and they go, okay, when we're talking about clean tech, we're not just talking about carbon sequestration, and that's not the only metric that we're thinking of. They understand that it is a more holistic ecosystem, but others are solely based on that, which is a really tough thing for synthetic biology or biological manufacturing company to do, because it's not, while yes, you are using a feedstock and you are converting that feedstock into a product that is going to sequester some carbon, the variables in that supply chain are so enormous that at the moment there isn't a really good understanding of how much carbon sequestration this type of technology does reliably, because there's, you know, whether you use bacteria or fungi or mammalian cells or whatever, you know, like there's an enormous amount of variation. And I think that as biomanufacturing matures as an industry, that will get more granular, and the intellectual property and opportunities for that particular element of greening that new manufacturing method is huge. And I can see a lot of opportunity there.
Thanks very much, Veronica. We've only got a few minutes left, and I guess the way you closed off that discussion was with a little bit of a prediction for the future, and recognising that none of us have a crystal ball. Well, I certainly don't, and if I did, I wouldn't be here. But although that said, I did predict that Adelaide United would beat Central Coast Mariners last night to deprive the Wellington Phoenix of the plate. What I'd like each of our panellists to do for perhaps a minute or so is to try and look into your crystal ball and just let me know a little bit about where you and your company are going to go in the next, say, 5 years in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. Perhaps if we can start with you, Kane.
Oh, look, perfect. We've got pretty much 5 years left to achieve our 2030 target of reducing our organisational wide company carbon emissions. So 5 years, and we've got to take 50%. So we're on that journey and we're making really good progress, but it's going to take a lot of investment in research, development, and a lot of engineering effort to really develop the products and the solutions for customers' homes that's going to allow us to reduce our footprint, which ultimately means reducing our customers' footprints in their homes.
Thanks very much, Kane. Richard.
Yeah, this is timely for us. We've been doing a lot of navel gazing over the last 9 months, developing a new strategy for plant food research, and two of the major impact areas that we really want to focus on and make a difference directly relate to our conversation today. One's on turning our food production systems into sustainable ecosystems. So we really using that ecosystem approach. As I said before, minimizing inputs while we maintain or maximize food production. And another area is that climate resilience space, where we've already got a role, obviously, in fixing carbon, but probably the biggest issue for us is actually dealing with all of the impacts of climate change that are going to have on our food production systems. So ensuring that food security and continuing to feed people, delicious and nutritious food. So those are kind of front of mind for us, and I think we'll be probably shifting a little bit more of our investment towards those spaces in the near future. But that's just my personal prediction. I think we've got all those conversations to come. And I'm sure the other thing is that obviously working with our customers and partners, those issues are also front of mind for them now, and so there'll be quite a bit of, I think, more focus on those sustainability issues. And also we've got the Green Deal happening in Europe, all of those kind of regulatory drivers as well that will actually move us much more quickly down towards that sustainability nirvana.
Thanks, Richard. And Janice, where is Hotline Labs in 5 years' time?
Yeah, for us in 5 years' time, we are excited to be able to contribute not only to the climate action, decarbonising horticulture, but when you break it right down, decarbonising horticulture means you make food grow more efficiently, you're using your energy to grow food more efficiently, and you're actually dealing with the waste problem, whether it's waste directly from the greenhouse themselves, because when you grow tomatoes, you have vines to deal with. Currently, greenhouses pay to landfill the green waste, but actually we could use that green waste to generate more carbon dioxide to make the plants grow more. So we're excited to be able to tackle those technical, I guess, challenges around dealing with twines and vines, while at the same time being able to tackle zero hunger. The other one that we're really excited about is really to decarbonize brown, hard to abate industries. So like I mentioned before, in New Zealand, you either burn natural gases or you ship in tanks of carbon dioxide. Really now we're able to use waste locally and be able to generate the heat resources that you need, the carbon dioxide resources that you need to grow food. Yeah, we're really excited about the next 5 years and being able to also expand the impact of what we do beyond horticulture would be incredibly exciting.
Marvellous. Thank you, Janice. And Veronica.
Thanks, Duncan. We aim to have product in market by 2026, and that'll be based on the biological activity. So that will relate to the good health element of Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned before, biomanufacturing being not a mature industry in consumer products, I mean, certainly is in pharmaceutical manufacturing, but we really want to be part of that conversation, and the different technologies and like AI and machine learning are huge here in terms of making the expression systems that we are going to be asking to produce our products in the future, and making them more resilient and making them less, precision and more robust in terms of their ability to make things in fluctuating temperatures or lower nutritional. I think is going to be key for this manufacturing platform to be as sustainable as possible. So we're going to be very involved in that, and we actually, through Callaghan Innovation, commissioned a climate impact report to highlight the hotspots of where that is. So we really are going to start digging into that a bit more. I want to lend my voice and the voice of the companies to furthering Indigenous rights around data sovereignty. So I definitely want to talk to Richard more about that. So yeah, those will be our focuses for the next few years. Just a few.
Some very laudable aims for us to close on. Thank you very much, Veronica.
Yeah.
And that has us finishing pretty much right on time. So if I could just express my personal thanks at this point to our panelists for being such an engaged and interesting group to talk to, both on a personal level, but also to listen to. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you very much to our audience for taking the time to join us and for giving us a forum in which to hold this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Ka kite.